Today's episode is brought to you by HERdacity. HERdacity is a nonprofit inspiring confidence in women to achieve their professional goals. For resources, networking opportunities, and a strong community of women, visit HERdacity.org to learn more.
Welcome to HERdacious, a podcast for audacious women. Welcome to HERdacious, the podcast for audacious women looking for a little career support on their professional journey. I'm Lorelei, the host of HERdacious, and I am really glad you chose to join us today because we're going to be talking about conquering self-doubt. Now, to help us in this epic challenge, I have the author of You're Absolutely Worth It, speaker and coach who helps ambitious women own their greatness, pursue their goals, and show up with a greater level of confidence in their career and personal lives, Miss Velera Wilson.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It is my pleasure. I am really excited about the conversation we're going to have today. This is what we're all about. So you wrote a book on the topic of conquering self-doubt, titled You're Absolutely Worth It. Why did this become a cornerstone issue for you?
Sure. So the full name of the book is You're Absolutely Worth It, Release Self-Doubt, which is the first part of it, Embrace Confidence and Own Your Yes. And so it was important for me because, yes, I have done so many great things in my career. I've been a marketing strategist for Fortune 100 and 500 brands for almost 20 years, launched products domestically and globally, and generated millions of revenue. But I remember a time when I was not confident and I struggled to understand my worth. And that started as a child, being born to a young single teenage mom. And I struggled a lot. I was the first person in my family to graduate from a university. And so when I entered the workforce and adulting, I just didn't know where I fit in. I was always worried about whether I was making the right move, asking the right questions, afraid to appear dumb in meetings, those types of things, even asking what I wanted in a relationship. So in short, I was hiding and I held back a lot. And so I started to meet other women who looked like me, didn't look like me, that were having similar challenges. They were struggling with what I call that internal swirl. And that question that was always ringing up and kept coming up in conversations was, am I enough? That was consistently the question. It was layered under a lot of things, but it was always that question, am I enough? And so as I started to do the work on myself and as I started to really get passionate about helping other women embrace their greatness themselves, it was just so important for me to write a book about overcoming that doubt and relentlessly pursuing our dreams and goals.
What forms can self-doubt take in a person?
Oh gosh, the outcomes are so many. If you look at what it means really when you doubt yourself, it's you don't think you're enough. You don't think you're good enough. You're qualified enough. So a lot of times it'll show up by you saying, well, I just don't know if I should ask for more money or negotiate my salary. Or it'll show up and says, I don't know if I'm ready for that promotion or qualify for the promotion. It almost comes across as more questions than statements, like, am I, should I, can I, will I? As opposed to saying, I'm going to do this because I believe this about myself. And even in relationships, not having boundaries, saying yes too often when you should say no. I mean, the list is endless, but the underlying current is we don't believe that we're enough. And I've coached a lot of women who, at first, I wasn't making the connection between the outcome as for example, a woman saying, I'm afraid of negotiating, or I'm always nervous about speaking up in meetings, between that and self-doubt, until I started to coach different women. And we would start with that problem. And then I would dig deeper and they would eventually say, well, actually it's because growing up, I wasn't told that I could say much. I wasn't given much of a voice. It was always some underlying current, a belief about themselves or lack thereof. And so that's when I really start to make the connection and said, oh, wait a minute, we got to talk about the internal self first before we start talking about the external manifestation and how we show up in our personal and careers.
Listening to you give some of those examples, self-doubt seems like it takes the form of sabotage sometimes, right?
Oh, absolutely. It does, because inevitably you're questioning every step you make, or if you should take those leaps
Oh,
or
God.
those steps, right? As opposed to just saying, I'm going to do this and failure may happen or it may not happen, but I'm going to try. It's almost that risk aversion, because there's that fear of, I don't know if I'm qualified or capable. And if I fail, it's just going to prove me right. See, I told you, see, I knew I wasn't good enough, or see, yet people did say that I wasn't qualified or smart enough. They were right. I was right. So yes, it is a form of self-sabotage.
Man, that could be a really harmful loop to keep playing over in your head. The am I enough? Maybe not, maybe not, maybe not.
Yes, it definitely can. It definitely can.
Well, how can this show up negatively in the workplace if we have that self-doubt constantly giving us the negative feedback in our brain?
You don't go after what you're qualified for. So for example, you might work and do the role of the person right next to you, and they might be getting paid more, and you may be afraid to ask for that. Or you might put your head down and you're deep in your cubicle, or now virtual cubicle that might be,
Right.
and doing the work, but of someone that's at another level, a promotional level above you, but you are afraid to ask for that, or you still don't think you're enough. It's almost like you think you have to be perfect in order to qualify for that, as opposed to saying, no, I'm doing this now, and I'm going to take that next step in my career and advance. And it shows up in even during the job interview, when you're afraid to really show how good you are, because you don't want to seem like you're bragging. When in reality, you're talking about how good you are, because that's what you do in interviews. You sell yourself, sell the strengths of who you are.
Of course. Now, in the past, women have been told or expected to follow more masculine styles and qualities in regard to leadership. Where do you land on that?
I think we should just be ourselves. I don't think that you have to adopt another gender trait in order to be successful. I think you just should be you. There are amazing traits and qualities that women innately have that make us phenomenal leaders. We are consensus builders to some degree, and many of us, obviously I'm not saying all of us, but oftentimes we foster a sense of community. And most great leaders are very good at building consensus, or not even consensus, but gaining momentum and support behind a vision that they have. And oftentimes a good leader will talk to various people so that groupthink is avoided. Women are also good at that as well. We'll talk to different people, as just assuming that our idea is right. We'll talk to other people that might be subject matter experts and things like that. So we value a diversity of thoughts and opinions more often than not. We also are very good at empathy, oftentimes, not that that's just a female trait, but we tend to just be nurturers. So we're concerned about the total person. Again, great leaders are cared more about just the productivity of the person. We're actually concerned about the person themselves. So I think just naturally, we are great leaders in who we are. We lead our homes. And if you could take some of those same skill sets as moms and nurturers oftentimes at home, and you transfer this to the workplace, we're just as successful, if not more.
Velera, just a minute ago, you mentioned the internal swirl. Can you expand on that for me?
Sure. So I call that internal swirl also the internal chatter of self-doubt. And oftentimes it's very real internal and external forces that can bring self-doubt and hesitation a lot of times in our lives. And I have found that it comes from a variety of places. And one can be our own feelings of inadequacy. So we might think I'm not as good as, you can fill in the blank, them, because whatever we think about the other people that we're around, whether they're smarter, have more, access to resources, information, whatever we want to think, they're better than me. I'm not as good as them. Or, of course, it can be very real experiences in our career and our personal lives. So, for example, many women have experienced gender discrimination. That's not feigned, it's very real. Not to mention that there's, often unequal treatment because of race. And so those can bring waves of self-doubt and hesitation, or even cultural upbringing. Oftentimes women are raised to believe that we shouldn't be too aggressive, or we shouldn't promote ourselves too much, or talk about our work too much. So all these things together, whether it be cultural, whether it be real experiences, or our own internal esteem or feelings of inadequacy, can cause this internal chatter.
To me, self-doubt looks like the other side of the coin in regard to confidence. Do we need to be focusing in on eliminating self-doubt or feeling more confident or going after both at the same time?
Oh, that's a really great question. I really think that, first of all, the assumption that we'll eliminate or arrive at either one of them 100% of the time is just a false expectation.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us permission there. We all appreciate it.
It just is. And so that's where, even when I talk about in my book, what confidence is not. And sometimes we attach our confidence to a preconceived or idealistic state of perfection, which is dangerous because it's impossible to reach. The concept of I'll be confident when I get more money, when I get this title, when I get in this relationship, when I get in a relationship, we fill in all these prerequisites for our confidence. And that's such a false way to go. The way to go that I always speak to and talk about in my book is understand that confidence is not believing that you're perfect or waiting to be perfect in order to be confident. It's recognizing that right now I bring value. I'm not perfect. I am evolving, and I give myself permission to evolve. But where I am now, whatever space I sit in, whatever space I occupy, professionally or personally, I bring value. And so because I bring value, that requires equity. Equity being what you're willing to give me, what I require, what I command when I engage with you. I require some things. And so that's really, really important, I think, for women, because sometimes we think, well, for example, let's say if you're just starting out in your career or if you're new in an industry or something like that, sometimes we will diminish our value or almost take a back seat or even get in the trunk, when the reality is that we have value, and our experiences that up until that point have qualified us to get to that space. And so because of that, we should own our value and command our worth where we sit. And then knowing that I'm going to bring value to anyone I interact with, even today.
I love how confident you are in sharing these messages with us. Now, some of us out here might struggle a little bit with self-confidence. What advice would you have for us?
I think that first thing, as I mentioned, was release the need to be perfect. And that's a huge one, because so much of our confidence, really, if we really sit down for a minute and think about it, it's really based on something that we've told ourselves about ourselves or about our environment, about what we're capable of. And so we have to release that need to be perfect in order to have confidence. We should give ourselves permission right now to own the space we're in. And I always tell people to take a trip down memory lane when you start to doubt yourself. If you really were to look back on everything you've done to get to where you are, the list would be long. When you think about the hours that you spent studying, when you think about the money that you have to pay back in student loans, when you think about maybe if you worked full time while going to school, maybe you think about how long it took you to get that certification, but you did it. All of those things have brought you to the space and time that you are in now. So that's the first thing. Release the need to be perfect. The second thing is I say stop comparing and owning what's in your hand. Ask yourself, what's in your hands to do a great job now? Then do that. Because sometimes we give people simply too much credit, all while discrediting ourselves. And how does that really sound? That sounds crazy. We give everyone else credit when we're the ones that in our skin that have done all the hard work to get to where we are, to be in the room oftentimes. And then the third thing I would say is to recognize that we are the solution to someone's problem.
Damn. I love that.
It's true. It's really true if you think about it. And I do this oftentimes when I'm coaching women on interviews. Sometimes, when a woman is super nervous about the interview, I don't know if I'm good enough for this interview. I'm like, well, first of all, let's take a step back and really think about this. Did you get invited to the interview? Well, yes. Okay, so let me ask you, do you think they would invite you to the interview if you weren't any good? Do you think they really want to waste their time?
No.
No, of course not. So then own the fact that you are a solution to their problem. And now all you have to do is go into the interview and confirm what they thought. And it is that you are the solution. So often we give away that power, but we have to realize that the little that we think we know is oftentimes what someone else needs majorly in their space. When we are hired, we're hired into a position to fill a need, to fill a gap. When we provide a product or service in our business, our client hires us to fill a gap. Own that gap that you were hired or that you were given to fill. There's no shame in that. You're the solution to someone's problem. When you believe that, when you really believe that, you will bring it full on when you go into that space, wherever it is.
Yes. All right, we're going to take a quick second to travel down sponsorship lane. Velera, we'll be right back.
Hi, Barbie here from Moonray, husband and wife indie pop duo. If you enjoy the intro music, we invite you to listen to our debut EP, Honeymoon, streaming now on all platforms. Visit www.moonray-music.com for more.
And we're back with Velera Wilson talking about eliminating, well, maybe not eliminating, but removing much self-doubt and moving towards our more confident selves. So, Velera, why is the message of confidence and self-worth so pivotal for women?
It's definitely important right now because if you think about our current environment, well, it's really a timeless conversation, but particularly right now, there are so many factors and forces that are occurring for women today. We have, we're in the COVID environment, for example, right now. And so many women are either considering or have left the workforce because of the stress involved, trying to maintain their household, trying to be on 100% at work and make sure that they appear to be fully engaged, even when they're trying to, for example, in many cases, manage homeschooling, manage double responsibilities right now. And then you layer on many of the conversations right now about pay inequities and things like that. It's just a lot that women are dealing with, both personally and holistically. And so it's so important for every woman to take a stake and say, you know what? I know right now maybe I'm scared or nervous about what what holds for me, maybe in my career or even my business. But there's some things that I can or cannot do. So, for example, many women are finding that they can't even go to their bosses and say, I'm really struggling right now, having a hard time juggling everything. I need to maybe have a flex work schedule. So many things that they just don't even feel like they have the liberty or luxury to ask for. Or even at home, many women are shouldering many of the responsibilities. And so when you talk about confidence and self-worth, it's saying, hey, I am important too in this entire equation. I'm not a robot. I'm not just, the person that can just get it done by any means necessary. There's some things that I need and require too. And being able to ask for those things without feeling guilty, without fearing, losing a job, losing a relationship, or saying either way, I'm going to ask, is so important right now. Or even if it's saying, hey, I really still do want that promotion. I know we're in COVID, but I've been working my butt off. Is there an opportunity for me? Having the confidence to just say yes to ourselves as women is doubly important right now because the forces can often right now make us feel like we should just take a backseat even further and close our mouths.
Right. Just be grateful for what you have and be quiet.
Exactly.
Well, when it comes to asking for what you want, also what you need, that can take courage. I feel like courage is something that women are not necessarily taught to prioritize as girls. Bravery and courage is something that is taught to specifically boys. We're taught to be perfect. We're taught to show up and do everything perfect and look good while doing it and backwards in heels and all that other garbage, right? How do we lean into that courage and then start asking for what we need and what we want?
It's so funny because you're right. We're taught to be perfect, play with dolls. Boys are taught to be competitive. And that in and of itself requires an individualistic attitude in some degrees versus more of a communal attitude, making sure everyone else is okay. It does take sometimes a bit more for us to have that courage to ask for what we want. But here's what I always like to think. For one, closed mouths, they don't get fed. No one knows what you really want unless you ask for it. And I think it's so important to find out much sooner than later if they can or cannot give you what you need. If you think about how much time we can waste because we don't ask, only to find out a year later, 5 years later, that we've wasted time in a career, a relationship that was going nowhere, we really want to reclaim our time and say, you know what, I'm going to ask for what I need now and find out if this is where I should continue to invest my time and energy. And so I think that's the first thing we have to ask. Oftentimes when I talk to women and say they're frustrated in their careers, I say, well, have you talked to your managers about what you want or your leadership? Well, no. Well, you can't really be frustrated if you haven't opened up and talked about what's important to you, about your career plans. So I think that's the one thing. Two is the courage really is not just for ourselves. I often tell women that when you ask for something, I talk about this in the book, you're not just asking for you, you're actually fighting for your legacy, your dreams, and the people that you want to be able to take care of at some point, whether it be your children, parents, your give to your community, or yourself. And so the ability to ask or not ask for what we want is directly related to our ability to contribute to our households, to how are we going to live right now? Where are we going to live? How much house can we afford? Where can we vacation? Where can our kids go to school? You name it. Everything is attached to what we are willing to ask for or not ask for. So I say when a woman is nervous and is not sure she can ask, think about all the things that you want to do in this lifetime. And even when you retire and about what you want to do for the ones you care about, and then you might find some courage.
Okay, so we've made the ask, right? And maybe we don't feel like it's been heard. How can we respond?
I will tell you the first way you shouldn't respond is to associate the no or the lack of response with your worth. So often I find that when we get a no, we start to question our value, our capabilities, our skill sets, our talents. And that's the first thing I say to women is do not do that. That's not no. Sometimes the no is simply a no because of political reasons, maybe in an organization. It could be a client doesn't have budget or simply does not want to spend the money on your products or services. It could be in a relationship where that person simply does not have the capacity, but it has little to do with you and everything to do about the other person.
Right. It's a no right now, not a no to you.
Absolutely. It is a no right now. Do not attach your worth to that no. And oftentimes a fear of that no will keep us from asking to begin with. So
yes.
Do not get so afraid of the no that you don't ask. But when you get the no, know that that's life and know that it does not change your worth. The other part I always say is a no tells you a couple things. It tells you whether you need to develop an action plan or a development plan or create what I call a transition plan, really an exit plan. Because really when you get the no, you should say, well, why? Clarify why the no so that you can really figure out what you need to do from there. So, for example, in a case of a woman in her professional career, so if they say, well, no, we can't give you that promotion or we can't give that salary. Okay, well, tell me why. What are the challenges? So you can find out, is it a reason or is it an excuse? And they're two totally different scenarios. A reason is a legitimate, hey, we legitimately cannot do something. An excuse is really about, well, we really don't want to do it. But either way, sometimes it may be hard to figure out which one it is. When you get your response back, then you can decide, well, is it for me to develop? Maybe there's a gap in my skills that have prevented me from getting this opportunity, so I need to develop some things. Or is it really, this isn't the place for me any longer, and it's time for me to move on? And so I call that part owning your yes. And that's why I say, when you get a no, at some point, you're going to have to own your own yes, not wait around forever to keep getting a no.
Owning our yes, to me, sounds like a trait of a leader. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think that leaders think about problems creatively and they say, okay, maybe this is a no for now, or it's a no through this person or through this channel, but it doesn't mean it's a no in totality. And so they'll look for ways to get to a yes. And I think you're right. That's what leaders do.
So how can women start owning our strengths as leaders? and own that yes?
I think, really looking at opportunities as crossroads to say, okay, this opportunity is here, or this challenge is here. Am I going to stay stuck here, or I'm going to find ways to get to the yes in other ways? So for example, and I've been through this as well, as, look for leadership or development opportunities in organizations. Got to know from maybe the immediate person. I started to, when I asked that person and got to know, I started to ask around, literally and figuratively, right? So ask around that person. And I eventually got a yes for a promotion in different organizations. So I think that goes back to, as a leader, say, okay, how can I get this done strategically? And, I think the big part of that is not always waiting for someone else to give you permission. Sometimes we're waiting. When we are ready right then, and as opposed to waiting years for someone to say, okay, we say, oh, I'm going to create the opportunity for myself now.
Love it. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, I hate this, but I have to ask for us to wrap up this episode. And on that note, I need you to share some resources that can help support our audience members to overcome any residual feelings of self-doubt they might be struggling with. What do you got?
So I've got a few, of course. Some of them are ones that I've created.
Yay!
So our book, You're Absolutely Worth It, is a great practical guide filled with really a lot of stories and anecdotes for how women can make the shift from self-doubt to confidence. I also have created even more practical guides as relates to nailing your interviews, negotiating your salary without letting fear override. Those types of resources, digital guides. The others I would say are, I follow so many different women who are leaders and who create different pieces of content. So everything from, for example, Tiffany Dufu with The Crew, it's a community of women who support each other in their goals. Minda Hart's another woman who's wrote a book about how to secure a seat at the table. Jen Cicero, who wrote the book, You're a Badass. So just a lot of different pieces. I pull from so many different sources that it's just important for, I think as a woman, you kind of find your flavor and pull from it.
Well, this has just been fantastic. Oh,
thank you.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to round out our episode with our Femme fact. Now, it's not often that we get the opportunity to talk about assassins on HERdacious, but today we'll be discussing some femme fatales that merit a closer look. Now, y'all are probably familiar with Marvel Universe's Black Widow, or maybe Selene of the Underworld films, or perhaps Villanelle from Killing Eve. All fictitious female assassins. Now, if you thought that those women were badass, then you might appreciate these two historical sisters. Sisters Truus and Freddie Oversteegan were Dutch communist resistance fighters during the occupation of the Netherlands during World War II. Truus Oversteegan was born in August of 1923, and her younger sister Freddie was born in September of 1925. They were raised by their mother, who taught them the importance of fighting injustice. Their mother was also a communist. In their tween years, their mother would often take in Jewish families and shelter them in their home as part of her fight against injustice. According to the chair of the National Hanny Schaff Foundation, Freddie and Truus's mother instilled in them the belief that helping people can come with personal sacrifice, and that high moral principles are worth the sacrifice. Now, the Nazis invaded the Netherlands in May of 1940, which is also when Freddie and Truus decided to join their mother in passing out anti-Nazi propaganda for the resistance. And that's not the Star Wars resistance, y'all. That's the Dutch resistance against the Nazis. Another act they performed on behalf of the resistance included gluing warning signs across German posters placed on the street that called for the recruitment of men in the Netherlands to work in Germany. The girls were around 15 years old at the time, so they were literally riding away from vandalism sites on bicycles. Now, the young ages of these sisters really worked in their favor, as police and soldiers were way less likely to suspect innocent-looking girls with little hair braids on bicycles of being active members of a resistance. For this reason specifically, we think a commander with the Haarlem Resistance Group visited the Oversteegan home in 1941 to recruit Freddie and Truist to the resistance. As resistance members, they would be tasked with missions like bridge and railway line sabotage, smuggling refugees and weapons, and, I quote, to shoot Nazis. To which Freddie is said to have responded, "Well, that's something I've never done before." Their mother eventually gave her consent with only one request to her daughters: always stay human. And then the girls joined the resistance. It gets pretty Tarantino after that, with the sisters becoming known for their assassination styles. Freddie and Truist would ride around on their bicycles with pistols in their baskets, and I quote, liquidating Nazis. In a very Hansel and Gretel get lured into the woods for candy sort of fashion, Freddie and Truist would even seduce Nazi officers in taverns and bars, asking them to go for a stroll, luring them into the woods where their resistance allies were hid, taking them out once the targets were within range. The sisters used this tactic repeatedly to great success, eventually setting out on independent missions and pulling their own triggers. They later teamed up with law student dropout Hanny Shaft, aka the girl with the red hair, becoming a female underground hit squad. Eventually, their hit list grew beyond Nazis to include Dutch Nazi collaborators and those who arrested or endangered Jewish refugees or resistance members. Apparently, Freddie was especially talented at following targets or keeping tabs on their whereabouts during stakeouts. Now, in 1945, about 3 weeks before the end of the war, their friend and close comrade in assassination, Hanny Shaft, was captured at a military checkpoint. It is said that 2 Dutch Nazi officers took her to the Bloemendaal Dunes, where one was to execute her at close range. It is said that he initially missed shooting her fatally, with Hanny responding, "I'm a better shot," before them being murdered. After the war, Truist became an artist and a poet. Freddie married and had 3 children, one of which she named Hanny in honor of their lost friend. In 2014, both sisters were awarded the Mobilization War Cross by the Dutch Prime Minister. And if you recall, Truist and Freddie were born 2 years apart. So it's some sort of odd world symmetry that they left us the same way, with Truist departing in 2016 and Freddie in 2018. Neither woman ever disclosed how many targets met their end at the hands of an Oversteegan. And on that ominous note, I would like to thank Miss Velera Wilson for joining me today. This has been a tremendous episode, and I am very grateful to have your participation in our show.
Yes, thank you so much. I have enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate the invitation.
It is our pleasure. Now, if you enjoyed this conversation as well, I really ask you to subscribe and share this show with a friend who you think might want to learn a little bit of career support and maybe something about female assassins. I don't know. It could be fun. Check us out. We're on all the places that you find the podcast, as you very well know, because you're listening to one right now. I'm Lorelei. This has been HERdacious. Enjoy the rest of your day.